Beloved, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Still morning. Thank you very much, and my apologies for not being here earlier on. A few urgent things had come up, but I'd like to acknowledge Professor Narayan, who is here with us, our very own Professor Narayan, as we've heard that we have another former Fijian who will be doing some work for us. It's really, I think, very, not just word does not come to mind, but very pleasing to have former Fijians who've excelled well overseas, have been recognized internationally, and are coming back home and having an input into the country of their birth. And I think it is our responsibility, and indeed something that government has been thinking about, as to how do we tap into the many Fijians who have left Fiji, some temporarily, some permanently, some who actually do want to come back, to be able to tap into that intellectual capital that exists outside Fiji. And when I'm talking about intellectual capital, I'm not only talking about, for example, those people who have necessarily only become professors. I'm talking about all sorts of Fijians. There could be, for example, rugby players who've now played for a couple of decades and now residing in France or residing in UK. So they can actually share their experiences with us for the young Fijians who may be going overseas to play rugby, or for those who may, for example, be working in the construction sector and have migrated as a result of that, or initially taken up into other countries for their skill sets. The nurses who work in UAE, the women who work, for example, on the west coast of North America, a lot of them in California, a lot of them are quite vocal also on social media. Those ones who also we can tap into their knowledge base, their experience. And of course, we've got the academics, we've got the engineers, we've got the doctors. The leading doctor today, a heart surgeon in New Zealand, actually comes from Lambasa. Now, on the flip side, of course, Fiji currently does not have a single Fijian doctor that can carry out open heart surgery. God forbid if any one of us at the moment or now has a heart attack, we require open heart surgery, bypass. We cut open the chest and we play around with the heart and get the bypass done. There's not a single Fijian doctor that can do that. The question that needs to be asked is, why are we in that situation today? What did we not do that led us to a situation where we do not have that capacity? And how we can learn from that past. As we say, in order to have not only a bright present, but a better future, you need to be able to be critically analysis and factually critical about your past. And this review that is going to be carried out by TSLS is precisely in that space. It's precisely that opportunity for us to be able to look at what we can do to be able to better position Fiji, to be able to also, at an individual level, give people that level of enthusiasm that brings out their passion in whatever that they are good at. There are many people in Fiji, many young people. Some of them are very passionate, for example, maybe about farming. They may be very passionate about woodwork. They may be very passionate about medicine. What environment can we create to be able to help them realize that passion and bring it to fruition in terms of their day-to-day career? And also at the same time, we'll be able to contribute to the overall well-being of our country, to provide that capacity. That is what is at stake, frankly, at this point in time. You know, as we talked about yesterday, we had the pleasure of having the professor at the FCCC function, where he was the chief, he gave the main lecture. And essentially, you know, even when you talk about things like farming today and we talk about knowledge-based economy, a lot of us still have a very rudimentary understanding, or when we talk about the word farming, it conjures a very rudimentary way of looking at things. Today, modern day farming involves technology. It involves high yields in very small spaces. We were in Vancouver last week for about 36 hours and met a couple of the ministers, where they're looking at, you know, vertical farming inside containers, underground, on top of roofs, where they now have what they call containerized farming behind a restaurant, where they grow lettuce and various other produce that they use. So when I go to the restaurant and when they feed me lettuce, which I have ordered, they actually break the lettuce from behind the back door. And that's how they're feeding you. So that adoption of technology in that space is critically important. What can we do? We are very unique in the sense that, as mentioned yesterday, 70% of our population is below the age of 40, 65% below the age of 35. So we have a whole cadre of people, young minds, they can absorb lots of things. What can we do to nurture that? What environment can we create? Of course, it requires a whole, array of things that need to be addressed, right from how do we teach people in EC and primary school, the methodologies, the syllabus, etc. But apart from that, the overall holistic approach is that we must be able to be attuned to understand that we need to integrate technology, need to integrate new ways of teaching, and need to integrate and understand what is our need and our demands. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this review will be very, very useful for us as government. And indeed, it's not only something that's the intellectual property of one government or one political party, it should be the intellectual property of the entire country. And we need to be able to then have our analysis, have our policies based on these independent assessments. And all of you as critical stakeholders, I see some of you are here principals in various schools, and some of you are from the tertiary institutions, etc., and various NGOs and young people too. All of you have a key role to play. And frankly, in order for us to be able to realize the full potential of our individual Fijian citizens, but also to be able to have a society where we have capacity in respective areas. So many times you talk about, I'm a bit focused on ENT, like on medical side, but we say there's only one ENT specialist in Fiji. Question is why? Is it because doctors that come out from the medical schools in Fiji don't want to become ENT specialists? Or is it because we don't have the curriculum available at the medical school, FNU? Is it because we don't provide enough funding? There are a number of issues that need to be addressed. There's a number of skill sets that are not available in Fiji. And we need to be able to identify those skill sets. There's a shortage of surveyors. People complain to you that it takes 3 years to get a survey done. So if you don't have enough surveyors, then you don't have enough land development. We don't have enough land development, there's no economic activity. When you don't have economic activity, you don't have prosperity. You don't grow the wealth. It's very simple, very basic. So to be able to tie up those ends, to see the logical flow, in the same way we try and see the PS Civil Services here, try and inculcate the idea into the civil servants that your one decision can actually have a huge impact on how many people will actually get employed, how many people will actually be able to have a roof over their heads, how will our GDP grow. One decision can actually have a huge impact on that. Your ability to not respond to a particular query from an investor, the inability of the HR department of Ministry of Education to respond to some teacher making an inquiry. Because if you don't do that, then therefore you not create a very conducive environment, work environment. If we have all this technology available at our fingertips, why aren't we using it a lot more smarter? That's what your knowledge-based economy is about, is using information, using data, and using it for the right purpose in terms of doing the proper data analysis. The other point that I'd like to make, all of you represent different organizations, different sectors. Please, it is critically important to share data. Because if we all have the same purpose, let's not get territorial about data. We find that previously in times between different ministries, people get very territorial. If you are able to access data, then we'll be able to make better decisions, fundamentally. So data should not be, obviously there's privacy issues which we protect, but in terms of data regarding, analysis of how to better provide services, how to provide educational facilities, on what syllabus should be rolled out, what courses perhaps should be rolled back, What are the skill gaps? Those are the things that are critically important in that respect. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, that government has, as you know, the rationale for free education started from the fundamental belief that young people of this country should have access to education, irrespective of their socioeconomic background. It's a key issue. There are literally thousands of people we have met, thousands of Fijians we've met who've said to us, a lot of them women, who've said to us, we wish we had free education in our time. Because our family was big, as you know, families tended to be big in those days, that our parents could not afford to send all of us to school, so our brothers got educated, because the girls would stay home, learn how to cook and clean, because they would get married in any case. In those days, you could get married at the age of 16 with parents' consent. So they did not get to go to school or complete school. There's so many people, even males, who've said, I wish I could have gone to school or gone to high school. I was a really bright student, but my father could not afford it, or my mother could not afford it. I wish I could have gone to university, but we could not afford it. There are literally thousands of people like that. So when we started free education, our main goal was to ensure that everybody gets to at least complete high school. Of course, school fees is one thing. So subsidized transportation is not only about bus fares. We tend to be very sort of urban-centric. We actually provide, what we call RSL bus fares, the mini buses in the rural areas. We actually pay for boats. When you have outer islands where some village is around the corner, around the cove from the school, we actually pay for the transportation for the bus, those boats, those punts. All of that is done so we don't have a level of inequality in access to education. The other point, of course, is that linked into that is the digital connectivity. As I mentioned yesterday, some of you may have been there, I'm repeating myself, but all of us are sitting here, we all have access to internet, high-speed internet. A lot of young people don't realize that back in 2008-9, there's only one mobile phone company in Fiji. There's only one company that provided international services, Fintel. Some of you are old enough to know to make an overseas call, it was a big deal. We had to go down to Fintel, sit in the booth, and they'd place the phone call. You're lucky to do it from your home. Today you have free talk time to Australia. In a span of only about 10 to 12 years, things have dramatically changed in terms of technology. Access to technology, access to telecommunications. Unit cost of a mobile phone, peak period, 99 cents a unit in 2008 or so. Now it's about 23 cents a unit. 7 up, 5 up, free talk time. The other day I was driving somewhere between Galoa and Yarawa. I saw kids by the roadside taking selfies and posting it up. It's unheard of. We have over 620 or 630,000 authentic Facebook accounts in Fiji. Forget the fake ones. Authentic Facebook accounts in Fiji. 95% of Fijians now have access to internet. The digital age has been hailed as a great equalizer. But as we said yesterday, it can be the greatest disequalizer also. Because if you have children who are in schools currently in Fiji who don't have access to internet, the disparity between those school children and those in Suva is far bigger and wider now than ever before. Far bigger and wider. Beginning of this year, we were about in 40 different locations, about 10 or 8 were nursing stations. All the others were schools that we connected with internet. So teachers over here, of course, you can download your worksheets, print it off. Those teachers, some of them have to travel 10 kilometers to get somewhere where they can get some internet connectivity. It was very difficult. We've given them now webcams, laptops, printers, Wi-Fi connectivity, a lot of them through satellite connectivity. There's a village nearby. We've Wi-Fi'd the school compound, so the villagers can come by and they can also connect to internet. So we need to continue to do that. because there could be lots of children in those schools that currently are not connected to internet who just need that opportunity to be able to contribute to our economy. They need that accessibility, and it's only fair, and indeed it is their right to be able to have that access to education. So there's a number of things that, of course, that we had planned to do, and free education was one of them. The other, of course, was access to university studies. And the fact that we have 70% of the population below the age of 40, it means we are a young population. And biologically speaking, I've said this and people sort of, giggled and all of that in younger crowds. When you have a younger population, you'll have more babies. Young people make children, old people don't. It's a fact. It's a biological fact. So when you have 65% of the population below the age of 35, you'll be getting lots of babies. So it means our health system, we need more midwives. You'll see in the budget we had announced, now midwives will get certain allowances if they're waiting around for women to deliver. We need more midwives. We need people to pursue careers in that area. At the same time, we need to ensure that the educational facilities we're offering, whether it's scholarships, whether it's in terms of free education, has to be done on a sustainable basis. It has to be sustainable. I would love somebody to tell me which country in the world provides on a sustainable basis, or has been doing so, in particular in the developing world, completely free education in university. Completely free education. I would venture to say nobody. Now, the point is that we still have people accessing studies after university. It has to be done on a sustainable basis. We have toppers, people who do toppers, I'm sure they've talked about this. There's no requirement for you to pay back the money, but there's a requirement for you to pay back by way of working in the country. You don't even have to work for government. If tomorrow somebody goes off and does medicine, somebody does engineering, somebody does accounting on a full topper scholarship, they don't have to work for a government, as long as they work in Fiji. And the period in which they work in Fiji is linked to the amount of money we spend on them. So for medicine, it's 8 years. We spend what, over $80,000 a year or so? 80,000 altogether, sorry. It's 8 years. That's only fair. In fact, some may think it's over generous, because we've invested $80,000. If I calculated and put the interest rate to it, I'm sure Professor Narayan would have probably spoken about that. But the fact is, they have to contribute to the country. We had initially, when we had TELS, we had a few people actually who said, we'll be back, we're just going overseas. They've never come back. We've lost money that way also. Some, a little bit. We put a stop to it fairly quickly. But that's very unpatriotic. That's actually very selfish. Because the taxpayers, through the governmental system, or with the government's borrowed money, has actually paid for your education. If you do want to go, you can go. You just pay back the money. It's only fair, because you've got lots of other kids coming behind you. In the same way, those people who have just finished university and have kids and say, oh, we want our debts all paid off. Well, what about your kids who's going to come behind you? Are we going to keep on paying for them too? We have a very generous system. If you are on TELS and you pay 50% of your debt within the 3 or 4 year period, depending on the loan that you have, we forgive the other 50%. You pay 50% within that period, we forgive, we write off the other 50%. That is extremely generous. You go to USA, people are 60 years old, they're still paying the university loans. The academics here would agree, they would know that system. The banks, hopefully, are also now participating. We had a meeting with the banks before the budget. They've shown interest that if somebody gets a job, they're actually willing to provide them the 50% funding, so at least they've got rid of the other 50% of the debt. And then they have a relationship with the bank, because they have jobs. So we're encouraging a lot more private sector participation in that space. It may have been, a lot of people may have missed out on this, but we also provided in the budget as announced, if companies, private companies now sponsor students, they can also get tax deductions. At the moment, if, for example, a company pays for somebody to go and study, they can't claim it as a tax deduction. Now they can. 100% of it they can claim as a tax deduction. And indeed, you see, the whole approach to knowledge-based economy is that everybody needs to participate. I could be wrong, but I don't see any companies here, large corporations. And this is one of the things that I do lament. I remember a few years back, I was in Singapore and I went to meet the Minister for Transport. And in the lobby of his office, downstairs, all these young kids were there, young children, school students in the school uniforms. And I asked him, I said, what were those children doing? He said, no, we're trying to get them to be interested in the transportation sector. We're trying to get them early, so no other ministry will steal them. You see, they value human capital. They value the fact that if we want to make people go down a particular career path, we need to try and entice them earlier on. How many companies go to high schools? Indeed, I've said to PS Civil Service, government needs to start going to high schools and even early or late primary school to talk about what's the fantastic thing about forestry, what's the fantastic thing about marine science. We lack people in those areas. Make it attractive. To use the lingo of young people, make it sexy. We have to do that. How many parents in this room will put a hand on their daughter or son and say, I really want you to become a counselor because I think you're very good at listening to people as a career. Not many people. One of my sons, I look at him always and I think, this guy's got very high levels of what I call emotional intelligence. He's very sensitive. He can sit with the room and he can sense who's upset or somebody's, not feeling comfortable. And I said, he should actually probably become a counselor or something, But we don't see parents, society generally encouraging people. I mean, I remember as a kid in school, when somebody did not study well, the teacher used to say, what, you want to become a farmer? And today we want the farming sector to grow. But we have a whole history of actually debunking the farming sector, debunking people who will become farmers. It's a fact. It's in our psychology. So if we want to have a knowledge-based society, we need to be able to get rid of those prejudices. It's career paths that people look down upon. So I think, in order for, without sort of talking for too long, it's a partnership, it's a collaboration between all the stakeholders. Human capital, of course, is one of the most valuable things now. Today in Fiji, we have a lot of pressure actually on our labor sector. It was interesting, a politician recently in Parliament stood up and said, we should stop people from leaving Fiji. Why are they going and leaving their villages and going and working overseas? That's their choice. They want to do that, let them do that. Recently, we were in Nandi, and where we had about 60 to 80, mainly men, who qualified in knowing how to use chainsaws and doing silviculture in forestry sector. I understand 50% of them have been taken up by New Zealand to go and work on 6-month contracts. The forestry sector in New Zealand is predominantly private sector. They need people to work for 6 months. They go and work there. There's opportunities for them here. What we are thinking also is that, at this point in time, whenever we have a cyclone and there's all these trees that fall down in rural areas or on the highways, etc., we get government people rolling out with their chainsaws and going around. We can actually, if we have all these people in this particular location, in this particular village, who have expertise in sawmilling, why can't we outsource it to them? Why do we have to transport people from one central area? We can give them, they have their own business, they have the skill sets, they've got the chainsaws. We contract it out to them, they can be on standby 6 months of the cyclone season. So you see, these are the new ways of looking at it. My point being is that there are various preferences in professions that are changing overseas. A lot of Aussies and Kiwis don't want to work in the hospitality sector. Read articles. You can go online and read articles. New Zealand apparently has a shortage of 64,000 people in the hospitality sector. Not all the restaurants are now open for breakfast, lunch and dinner. They don't have enough people wanting to do waitering. Melbourne had a waiting time in the public health system a few weeks ago for 24 hours. If you went to a public hospital in Melbourne, you had to wait for 24 hours before somebody actually saw you. There's a shortage of nurses. One health center in Suva, around Suva area, without mentioning the location, lost 6 nurses in 1 week. We have some teachers who went to Australia. They don't have enough teachers who want to go and work in remote Australian towns. And the allowances they pay is phenomenal. My brother-in-law works as a teacher in one of those remote areas. There's no way we can compete with that level of salary and allowances. No way. It's completely flipped the entire pay structure in our country. But that's the attraction. You'll have some attrition. But on the flip side also, and sorry, they lost about 60 accountants. There's shortage of accountants in Australia. We have a glut of accountants in Fiji. Some people who've done accounting cannot get jobs in Fiji. But the 60 accountants they would have taken would have been those already in the workforce. So some experience would have left. The point is that despite all of this happening, we have to be as a country also look at other ways in which we make Fiji attractive to our own people so they can stay. You see, not everybody wants to go and work in Sydney where they have to travel 2 hours each way to work. I know people who live in Sydney, they live in the suburbs, you know, the typical migrant dream is to have a nice big home. So they live out somewhere in the outer suburbs. Takes them 2 hours on the train to go one way to work and 2 hours back in the evening. That's 4 hours spent traveling. Whereas if they lived over here, they probably could get to work, you know, okay, if you're driving maybe 1 hour, if you're living in the Suva corridor. It's not that bad. Some people go by bus. Some people it takes them 15 minutes to go to work. On a Friday afternoon, I can jump in the car and go down to Deomba and have a swim. Or if I'm living in Nandi, it's only 15 minutes away. Can I do that in Sydney? If we have full, you know, tertiary medical care facilities available in Fiji, we have everything then. We've got Aspen Medical that's now coming into Lautoka. They will be providing open heart surgery facilities, procedures, which currently we do not have in Fiji. So once they do that, they do chemotherapy, etc., then Fiji becomes a bit more attractive for people. Say, okay, you know, I've got my medical facilities, I've got high-speed internet, I've got a good job, the roads are good, I've got water systems, law and order is safe. I was recently in, and I got a bit insulted in Vancouver. The night that we were leaving, we had a get-together at one of the hotels to meet the Fijian community. And somebody said to me, you know, when my children want to go for a holiday and they go to Hawaii, I don't have any problems, I'll let them go. They're now saying they want to go for a holiday in Fiji, but I'm hesitant. I said, why? He said, do they still do muggings in the streets in Fiji? He said, it's a perception. So it goes to things like law and order and security. So what do people look for? They want a job. They want access to facilities, amenities. They need access to health care, good health care. They want to ensure that if there's a contract, if there's a dispute, they go to courts, it'll get resolved by an independent judiciary. They want to know that when they walk the streets, they'll be safe. They want to know that the children have a brighter future. Those things are all the building blocks. And in order for us to be able to ensure that people feel that sense of comfort because of those common demarcators, we need to invest further and further in a knowledge-based economy. That's where it comes around. It's actually a circle. It all feeds well into each other. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. We have a launch of this. I'm quite happy to, later on, if we want, we can take questions. but I'd like to thank the invitation. I'd also like to thank the board of TSLS, the chair, Rakesh Ram, Dr. Amy, she's also on the board, she's here. I do not see the other board members. Sorry? Vijender Singh is there, but these two are present, and I'd like to thank them for that because they do take time out of their, careers, out of their time that they have. They have very busy careers, a doctor and a banker. So, ladies and gentlemen, and they don't get paid astronomical amounts of money, not at all. But it's for the love and the passion for what they're doing. I'd like to thank them for that, and also the staff of TSLS. I know that parents, students get very passionate. Sometimes they may not necessarily get what they want. They become very passionate about it. Just to put into perspective before I finish. Previously, before TSLS came into being, we had in those days, what we had the PSC scholarships. We had a multi-ethnic scholarship. We had in those days what was called the Fijian Affairs Scholarship. The way I remember when we had those scholarships, even post-2007, a lot of the people, for example, in the ones that the Fijian Affairs Scholarship, etc., a lot of those people did not actually get it on merit necessarily, depending on who they knew. Sometimes it broke down to provincialism, etc. We had a number of people with very high marks and said, look, the other guy's got the scholarship, I've got much higher mark than him, why can't I get it? Just because I'm not connected. We had people, for example, in the other places too, similar issues. Now TSLS basically does it on an open merit recruitment basis. Well, not recruitment, open merit sort of scholarship basis. It's based on marks. The toppers is based on the skill sets. We have if you see the toppers breakdown of the areas that we're offering toppers, is more science-based. We don't give any scholarships for people to become lawyers. There are too many lawyers. But the point is there are other areas where we have a shortage of people. The allowances that were paid was about $900 a year, $1,200 a year. I think $1,400 if I'm wrong, $1,200 maximum? $1,500 a year. Today allowances exceed what, $7,000? It's nearly $6,000 something dollars. I mean, these are fairly healthy levels of allowances. And the reason why we're being generous about it is because we want to ensure that the students who do get the allowances are able to focus on their studies. Because for us, that is the end result, and that's what we want. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation, and I wish you a good morning. Vinaka, thank you.
Change is inevitable, but it does not have to be drastic. A simple change can make a huge difference. We, the team of the Tertiary Scholarships and Loan Service, endeavored on the journey to refresh our brand identity to help achieve a greater connection with our audience. Today, we share with you the revamped brand identity for Tertiary Scholarships and Loan Service, with service now being at the core of our values and the promise we will deliver, along with a refreshed logo identity that depicts knowledge, wisdom, empowerment, and inclusivity, presenting the new logo for Tertiary Scholarships and Loan Service as we work to empower Fiji's future. TSLS, empowering Fiji's future.